Can you guys hear me? I can't hear anything there. Are you muted? I have no audio.
Chris, can you hear us?
Yeah.
How about Charlie?
Crazy day, this is.
Okay, good.
All right,
Thank you.
yeah, just the next time, kind of hit the button down there in the lower left corner.
Okay. Hey, what hospital were you gonna go
Oh,
to? Oh, yes, it is. Yeah, it sounds like it. Then I was gonna look through it.
well, of course, with Tom Hill tonight, he's told me he's on the way to the hospital, he had broke his wrist, so,
Thomas,
yeah.
Tom Hale,
I just got a message from him, he broke his wrist.
How'd you do that? Well, down, huh?
Don't know,
Hale, Tom Hale, I don't know.
Yeah, he lives in, are they in Mount Vernon? No, they're in,
yeah,
Vienna. They live in Vienna. He's a big part of the GP, the Great Pine Yacht Club.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we're all here. I think Lenny's out in the other room, so we'll just give him a few minutes to get in here. He's always. Can you all hear me? Okay,
are we recording?
yeah. Sorry. Lenny out in the, lobby,
I didn't see him.
maybe we'll just start. And get going then. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'll begin with call to order. Present, myself, Tanya, Al Feinberg, Kimberly. On we're here in person. Chris is on Zoom. Charlie Bader's on Zoom. I think Lenny Reich is on his way, so why don't we just, there he is, here's Lenny. You're all set.
Doing a little quick business up front there. I'll be right back out.
Okay, we'll just,
Go ahead and get started. I'll be back in just a minute.
old business is consideration of the December 10th, 2024 minutes. Has everybody had a chance to read them? Yeah. Any comments or suggestions or changes?
I think it's a good document,
As always with Paul,
as always with Paul.
do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
I
to approve.
approve.
All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
I,
Aye. Aye. December 10th minutes approved. The new business is discussion of the next steps on the Lakes and Natural Resources Committee, beginning with our, December. Chris, you want to, begin this, or can you hear all right?
Yeah, I can hear. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
excellent.
Okay. Yeah, so why don't we start with Paul's comments? Thanks, Paul, for showing up in person. How's your back doing?
well,
Not good.
it's not good. I'm supposed to have surgery a week from today, but I may have to postpone it because of other medical problems. It's a confusing day today.
Sorry, I'm very sorry to hear that. Yeah, back is, I have a bad back, so I can relate. It's very tough.
Thank
So,
you, Graham.
yeah, so, why don't we, just go through the, I think that you had the comments on change number 11, the new 11. And, maybe we want to just discuss those briefly. What do you think?
Change
Good.
11.
What was that?
Is this from Paul's email to you, on the 10th?
Yeah. this is
Yes.
the
Okay,
Yeah, I'm thinking about Paul's and the first thing maybe we could get out of the way is I was thinking that it would that a 30-foot and 30% would maybe just sound better than 25 feet, which was arbitrary. We were at 10 feet, then we went to 25, and I don't see why it couldn't be 30 feet and 30%. Does anybody have a reason why that doesn't fly, or what do you think?
I think that works great.
Yeah, I think the bigger the better.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how we feel about it, is that it doesn't hurt to go bigger. So, okay, so I can make that change.
So we're gonna go to 30 feet?
30
was
feet,
that?
30%.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
You said we're gonna go to 30 feet and 30%.
Yes,
We're
Whichever
gonna
is
change
less,
that.
whichever is less, is that right?
I'm
Shouldn't be-
sorry, I couldn't hear you very well.
It's 30 feet or 30% of the distance between the shoreline and the structure,
whichever's less.
whichever is less, correct?
Yes,
Right.
You know, we don't wanna say whichever is more.
That's a whole different standard. We can discuss that. Maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, it is.
So if it was 30
We have to be
30
optimistic,
feet. Or 30%.
whichever is more.
no, it can't be whichever is more. Because if you're, if your structure is 30 feet let's say 30 feet from the lake,
Mhm.
it's gonna be 30% of that, so it's gonna be 10 feet. Is that 10 feet? No, it's a third, but anyway, so I think we decided that for the grandfather
Right,
buildings that been around forever, we would just like to get 30% of the distance as a buffer. And it couldn't be whichever is more.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That kind of assures us the 30 feet.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'll get into a
Right.
big fight.
I mean, I can, my family's place is probably 10 feet from the lake, so it doesn't have a lawn, but still, if it did, then
Yeah.
I don't think you couldn't have a 30-foot buffer there, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the next comment was, Paul was saying, can the owner continue to grow and cut grass? And I felt that the way this is written is clear that you couldn't, but what do you think, Paul? You found it confusing?
I don't think it says anything about cutting grass. Right now, I envision that this vegetative buffer only allows vegetation up to 30 to up to 3 feet. Is that,
Right,
that's it?
right, so you couldn't cut, once I got up to 3, you couldn't cut it at 6 inches. You could cut it at 3 feet, 1 inch is 1 inch.
You can
Do you
have tall
think this-
grass that you cut the top off of.
Yeah,
But I don't know if that, I think if you gotta be specific, if you're really talking about, you're not allowing, so you have an area of grass, now it can't be cut. Unless it goes to 3 feet, then you can cut it about 3 feet. Is that what you're trying to say?
What was suggested?
And if you're trying to say that, well, then we should say it. That you can't cut grass, period.
Yeah, we're suggesting.
Well, we're just saying, we're saying vegetation and grass is vegetation, so, but
But say, let's bite the bullet. I mean, the real issue is we're trying to stop grass being allowed to be maintained down to the shoreline.
Yeah,
People can argue that grass is not, is
grass is a plant, the herbaceous
plant.
plant, so that,
is it vegetation, I mean, why don't we just be clear?
Well, I thought we were, but we can make it more clear, Paul, because it's obviously not clear to you. So a recovery buffer is defined as an area where cutting of grass or any other vegetation under 3 feet above. So if we just add that in there, wouldn't that suffice?
yeah,
Yeah,
Okay,
and can Charlie, the other question I had is, and I haven't maybe thought it through carefully. When is it not a recovery buffer? Where do you get the two buffers? I guess it's not a recovery buffer if a new construction. But where is it not a recovery? It's generally, the usual condition is a recovery buffer.
Well, there's just I mean, you have all the ordinance which is in place for people who are building a new house or anything, but what you can't do is you can't force somebody to stop cutting their lawn. And so this is when you have a trigger event, you then say, okay, you want to build a shed, that's fine, but we need you to put in a recovery buffer. And okay,
But
what's
I'm
a
saying
recovery buffer?
all a recovery buffer.
Pardon me?
It's not like this. When Charlie presented this, he was talking about, because I went through his words, that there are gonna be 2 standards and there's 2 situations here. But when I think it through, it really is mostly all a recovery buffer. It's a buffer, where it's requiring a buffer.
We're trying to make it clear that in a situation where there's a trigger event, we are going to require you to put in what we're
buffer.
calling a recovery buffer. And it's different rules than, if you have different rules. If you have an existing property, you have to then fall into the cutting rules of that we have with the formula, the point system, all the stuff that the DEP requires. So we're saying that there's something called a new thing called a recovery buffer. And with a recovery buffer, you can't cut over 3 feet unless it's a tree. Let's say, and it says, however, sapling trees may be cut to ground level when over 3 feet in height and less than 2 inches in diameter at 4.5 feet above ground level. So that's a different thing. That doesn't, you can't do that with a non-grandfathered situation under the ordinance, and the DEP doesn't want you to do that. And that's the, that's the minimum. So this is a new situation where somebody's got a lawn and the town says, great, you want a permit for a shed? We're going to require that you put in a thing that we call a recovery buffer. I mean, if you don't like the word buffer, I don't know what we could do.
I'm confused,
Okay.
because we're trying to deal with, we're dealing with tree cutting, or we're dealing with a buffer? And it's overlapping here. And it's sort of like you're pulling in the recovery buffer by way of tree cutting. Well, let's be clear that if the buffer is more important than the tree cutting. I mean, I want to make clear in how we present this to the planning board, that we're dealing with a buffer. And if we're gonna deal with tree cutting, that's sort of almost ancillary to the primary objective that we have here is for a buffer, as I see it.
Well, the issue here is if we require them to put in a buffer like we have in all the other properties, then they are not allowed to cut sapling trees unless they comply with the point system. And therefore, their view will become obstructed by the sapling trees. So now you've actually taken away from them their view. And we don't think that's good, appropriate, or certainly palatable. Does everybody else have a confusion with this, or is Paul alone? Does somebody else want to chime in here?
I'm understanding it, so I was actually gonna ask Paul, I guess I'm trying to follow what you're trying to rectify.
I'm trying to, well, first of all, I'm trying to understand what our changes with regards to the button. It seems like we've backed into this buffer, recovery buffer, by way of talking about tree cutting. And so the recovery buffer really, right now, it's only dealing with, we call it vegetative, but you're talking about trees that they can only be 3 feet high. Right?
Well, you can't cut until something gets to be 3 feet tall, and then you can cut.
The third of the bottom.
What's that?
Then you can cut, if there's an existing, if the instance becomes when this recovery buffer comes into play because of some municipal permit that's been requested, and you have grass and you have trees, and you can take the trees and you can trim the bottom 1/3 of the tree, right? And as to any other trees that are less than, what, 2 inches and
2.5 inches on
2.5 inches at 4.5 feet, then you can reduce that. You have to reduce it to 3 feet.
No,
oh,
You don't have to.
anything less than 3 feet is protected,
yes,
do not cut. When you're above 3 feet, you can cut the bottom third, you can trim it.
Says under 3 feet.
That's silly. I mean, you got a 5-foot tree, and you're gonna cut, 14 inches of it. What is that?
Well.
Well, it makes them, well, they can see the
You
lake.
can't cut it. It doesn't say that you can't cut it. I mean, there's a buffer, I mean, if it's sick or, you have a reason to cut it, it can be cut, but.
I understand you can't cut vegetation at below 3 feet. So if you had a, 4 foot, 4 feet of various vegetation on the ground, you could cut it down to 3 foot.
That's a practice that's happening, but I don't see where that's allowable. All right, if it's, you can prune it above 3 feet.
I mean, like, say you had a sedge grass, you could, you could, that went to 4 feet, you could cut it to 3 feet.
I mean, aren't we
That's the
really,
way I read the,
yeah, aren't we really saying, if you're gonna disturb the ground, we would like not, for the mud to not go into the lake? Isn't that really what a recovery buffer is?
No, that's something else.
so,
All right,
That's a different change.
I think it's fine.
so what we're doing here is describing not letting anything grow back naturally and like a no cut buffer, but install something that's gonna be another vegetation
We're talking about trees or buffers here.
Yeah. buffer.
We're talking about buffer.
Yes.
But trees are in part of the buffer.
They're part
I understand, but we wanna,
Not just a buffer, a recovery buffer.
so when is, okay,
When is a buffer not just a buffer, but?
when is it a recovery buffer?
Well, when they get a permit, like, right?
It's only in this situation. We could call it a recovery zone if that is less confusing than calling it a recovery buffer.
And what is it that they're recovering from?
Pardon me?
The term recovery implies that they're recovering from something, and I'm just
Yeah, they
asking.
got a permit from the town of Belgrade.
From the
but they're-
lawn,
From a lawn, okay, I
from the
see.
lawn. They have a lawn. That's the only reason this comes into play is that they are grandfathered to not, to be okay. The town is okay with their not being in compliance with DEP 1000 or the regular shoreline zoning ordinance because they've been around forever. And we're hoping to get them to recover from that into something that will be more protective of the lake.
It does say here pretty clearly in 14, in the event a property owner seeks any type of municipal permit, property owner must establish a recovery buffer between any structures and a water body, tributary system, or upland edge of a wetland. So that's when this comes into play.
At 14.
So a municipal permit would include plumbing?
Good question.
I don't even have
No, it would.
14.
Yeah, it would. That's the whole idea. We wanna have a big net out there.
Right,
That
try
would-
to catch them.
Well,
and Hans is the fisherman.
now, we would like to do that. And I'm very much in the group that would love to be able to do that, but my recollection is we've been told that the town of Auburn can do that because they are in a special situation as a result of their water body being a drinking water source that we are not in, and that we can't do that. Haven't we been told that by the planning board, among others?
Yes.
Did the planning board tell us that, or were they going to think about that and get back to us? Or have they definitively told us
I
that?
thought George Steele said that to us, that Auburn, they couldn't bring in Auburn as an argument because it was a special water district.
Yes, we were told that.
Yeah.
And we were also advised by the Maine Municipal Association attorney that we couldn't do this.
Right, I've got
Now, I don't necessarily agree with that advice that we can't do it, I'm in favor of trying to do it and see what happens, but I just would, caution that. If someone applying for a plumbing permit and then being told that they have to put in a recovery buffer, it just seems like a total non sequitur, if you know what I mean. It just doesn't seem like there's any connection between the two.
I agree with you.
So they want to add a bathroom. Why do you get a plumbing permit?
Uh,
It's a state requirement. Any new?
Well, no, but he's not asking, he's asking a different question, Hans. He's asking, what is it you're trying to do? As opposed to the fact that you were required to get it by the state. He's saying, well, you want, it's like you want to add a bathroom, or you want to add, you're adding to your adding use to your property, so therefore you should have a buffer.
Or expand the
I
building.
mean, the idea of the way we are manufacturing the use of the trigger of a permit is getting absurd. And I think that we need to do more research on the legal authority to impose a buffer without a permit. And just because this municipal lawyer has an opinion, when as some of the basic stuff in law school flies in the face of this interpretation. I mean, it's a balancing act. You gotta look, and you've heard me say this before, I mean, you have a risk like, or a right like free speech, you can't yell free speech, fire in a theater because it's too dangerous. So it all depends, is the argument. It happens all the time, and whether we challenge this in different other ways. And we have a very high public health need that we're dealing with here, which is potential toxicity of the lake, I guess, and drinking water and algae. And so I think it's one of my reasons we should delay this is we need to idea of Chris of hiring lawyers and do some thought about how is it done elsewhere?
I think you're worrying too much.
I'm not worrying too much. I'm saying is we're extorting the idea of a permit. If it now we're saying a plumbing permit is gonna now trigger a recovery buffer. We're going, it's an end run that we're gonna get caught in. I think it's not gonna work. That's my opinion.
So establishing a recovery buffer that cuts down on the runoff from your lawn but still maintains your view is not an onerous thing. This is not an evil thing. If you've got 100-foot lawn, you're going to have a 30-foot buffer. If you're going to have a 50-foot lawn, you're going to have a 15-foot buffer. So it's not the end of the world. It's a reasonable thing to help protect everybody's interest on the lakeshore. And so we're not asking about something unreasonable, and we can't do that, I think, clearly, unless there's some leverage, which I think is the trigger event. And yes, George Steele said that Lake Auburn is different, but maybe we could look into this and see whether this is something that would fly. And, do some research and come to the planning board with a legal opinion on this, which I think would be very important.
I agree with you. For
What's that?
example, if you were able to have a standard, if erosion is occurring on a site. And some board or the erosion board or the CEO determines that this is an erosion site and it requires a buffer. That makes legal and practical sense to me. But it requires a buffer because the guy got a plumbing permit to install, another toilet.
This is a lawn that is running down to the lake, and it's not open dirt or anything like that. So it's a different situation, I think, but we've been told we can't just require that you put in a buffer into your lawn. And we've been told that that's clear. So we're looking for a way to come up with a reason for the town to be legitimately asking for, quid pro quo. You want a permit? Here's what you got to do.
They understand the permit.
Yeah.
the triggering, but we're backing into the triggering thing because we can't directly deal with it. We can't, could we write a regulation that says if the CEO determines that this site is causing erosion into the lake, then he can require a buffer.
I think we've been told that we can't do that, and it was the town attorney that wrote an opinion on it, but I don't know, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't even, anyway. I think we need to further study it. We're not gonna solve it right here.
So how do we think that we can go forward to further study this? Is this getting examples of other towns and how they've dealt with this?
Yeah. Some legal research, how it's done in other towns, other states. I don't know, I haven't put the time into it.
So I had a call with the executive
Planning board
director of,
decide if they wanna go with this,
Well, you know what they're gonna say,
what are they gonna say? They might not even notice,
you know what?
notice that we're just asking for a buffer if they get a plumbing permit.
We can do that.
Chris, you had something to say? So,
yes, so I had a conversation with the executive director of Main Lakes, and she is trying to come up with an attorney that would work for pro bono or low cost to help us on this. So she feels that this is all right up their alley. She, as I mentioned in my email, she'd like us to present at the Lakes Conference, which is coming up. I think it's in June. Because it's, this is, I think what I perceived is this is not just a Belgrade, situation. This is a situation for all the towns in Maine. And if we can come up with basically a model ordinance that other people can adopt and push forward, then I think it's appropriate. So maybe we want to work on that. And that's sort of the other concept, is that maybe we want to wait on our revisiting with the planning board in February and wait until we're got we go through everything. We have maybe some legal advice on all of these changes, and then we can come in and say, this is what, and not only is this is our opinion, but we've also vetted it with a municipal attorney.
Yeah, I would just I would add or make a point that. And this goes along with some of what Paul was saying, he mentioned other states. I mean, it seems that to me that some of the legal issues here in terms of whether we can do it or not are not really main state issues. These are national issues in terms of constitutional rights. So it goes beyond Maine, and not that what we do is going to go beyond Maine necessarily, but the issue is larger than just a statewide issue in terms of what rights the town has with some property owners.
But I would think that we need a, legal advice as to
Yeah.
what the pertinent issues are, and maybe that involves other states. But I can't tell you whether it's going to fly if California does something and, we want to do it here in Maine. I don't know myself as to Maine state, law and case law that would, affect that. So.
May I ask a question? This is Charlie.
Go ahead.
I heard about the town or the committee having consulted an attorney on some of these issues. To what extent has that occurred on several of these items? Is it the town's attorney or is it the MMA attorney? Or both? Do we know?
Charlie, we have in May 2024, Jen Thompson, the staff attorney, the Maine Municipal Association, weighed in on this to Lauren.
What was this? It wasn't just, it was There's a different context.
Not this particular one, just the lawfully non-conform, about grandfather in general.
Right.
It was particularly on the grandfather issue.
Yeah, but they did mention the buffer in this letter
We
that,
can provide it to you, Charlie.
Could you
If you
actually
would,
forward that?
Pat.
yes,
Yeah, maybe Pat, if you could just shoot that to all of us again. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got it someplace, but there's so many emails.
And was that grandfathering without a trigger event or with a trigger event in particular? Did she answer that question?
let me see, I've just got it,
It did not involve trigger events.
yeah,
So just as a general
general,
rolling back of the grandfather, you can't do.
right,
That's
Right.
my impression. Yes.
I think that's why we took the trigger path.
We took the
Yes.
trigger path because it's already in the law regarding septic systems where on the event of a sale, buyer has a requirement to get a certain septic system inspected. And that seems to have passed constitutional muster, so we're sort of using that as a foundation.
And that's what I've had in conversations with DEP where about what Auburn is doing, and it's that trigger mechanism is what I know they're comfortable with, put it that way. Whether that would pass, review by a court, I don't know.
And it's exactly the point I'm trying to make. It's a gradation between. They have a water district, we still have water here, so they're drinking out of it. We're utilizing it for non-drinking purposes generally, but it's still, it's how you look at it, it's how you see it, how you value it. In terms of the risks of the public.
I'm guessing you have the authority with the trigger event, but I'm not a lawyer, and I would want to review on that as well.
Yeah, and I think we want to go to the planning board, having had some review of this from a lawyer, because I think that'd be much more powerful than having them speculate on it and say, well, you can't do that, and
Right.
we start going in the wrong direction right off the bat.
To your point about this being statewide, I agree. I think it's, I talked with Pat yesterday about his involvement, I think, with the town of Rome on, some of these issues. I'm hoping to bring it to the town of Mount Vernon, some of this, just to get the ball rolling. And I know some of the people on the ordinance review committee, that's what it's called in Mount Vernon, one of whom's a friend and an attorney. So I may, again, it's important to have reviewed and probably get a couple of opinions on it, but I'll make some inquiries as well.
That would be very helpful. Thank you. Does somebody want to contact John Blaze and find out the mechanics, the dynamics of recording a buffer into a deed? Because he did mention that, and it would be interesting to have more information on that. Does anybody want to do that?
I'm happy to do it unless you feel somebody from the committee should do it.
No.
Nope.
I think that anybody who sticks their head up is appropriate.
I just happen to know John, from 10 years ago, so I'm
Oh, that'd be great.
comfortable giving him a call.
That
What
would be.
is the age range, Chris? I'm just curious, what are you asking John Blaze about?
Well,
What do you want?
I want to respond to your saying that this was a stupid idea, frankly, Paul. And I'd like to find out how do they record the buffers into the deed? What's the mechanics of that? Is the homeowner doing that? Is the city of Auburn doing that? I'd like to know more about this, because I think if we get challenged on this, I think it's a very important part of our recommended change to the ordinance. So any sort of experience that we could relate to the planning board and say, yeah, this is how Auburn does it. And it makes sense, because it didn't make sense to you, so therefore it's not going to make sense to part of the planning board and other people looking at this. So I think we should have ammunition on that.
I agree. The other inquiry might be, and I suggested, is to talk to a conveyancing attorney, a real estate lawyer who's doing conveyancing, and see how such provisions would impact marketable title. As a practical matter, I don't even know if the registry would accept this in deeds, and how insurance companies, title insurance companies would deal with this. So I think we should invite a conveyancing attorney to come in and talk to us, or inquire.
Well, let's hear back from John on it, because, for example, I bought some land in New Sharon and I have a limited right of way to get into my land, and it's limited to a specific number of axles on trucks for specific purposes, and it's in the deed, so it's so I have a restriction that will carry on to the next purchaser of my land in New Sharon as to the access across my neighboring landowner that sold me the land. So I believe, and I have, in Gardner, I've got in my deed that goes back to 1850, the neighboring landowner has the right to water their goats and cattle on from my bubbling spring, and which I think is fantastic, because I found it. It's still coming right out of the ground. So 150 years later. So I think it can be done. It can be written into a deed, or it can be referenced as a separate registered document.
An interesting point on that is that usually the abutter has to enforce some of that, but with the town, having an interest for the water quality, maybe they then have the right to enforce that if, a subsequent owner cuts it down, the buffer. So
Right.
just that mechanism is important to understand. I'll ask John to maybe provide us a couple of copies of it, and maybe they have legal opinions on it as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Good job.
So what else do we want to do?
Since it sounds like the direction we're going in is to kind of pull back from presenting some of these to the select board, planning board, I'm sorry. Maybe we should consider doing what we did this first round, which is presenting to them, which was 1 in 12, I think it's now 1 in 13 for consideration now. And then putting a few things on the back burner, and then maybe we, as our next batch, maybe we even have better luck putting this in smaller batches, could be some of the changes that we're recommending regarding septic. That might be more
That's kind of
straightforward.
a block of 4 or 5 different.
Yeah, just a thought to throw out there to get feedback. Because we
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to back burner everything.
No.
Yeah,
How do we feel about the septic? Has there been any comments here on what we've got? Beyond any new ideas or concerns? Or that's a big block of that's a good third of the whole. ordinance.
I like that concept of maybe taking this piecemeal. I'm still thinking that maybe we should get some feedback from an attorney on these, or somebody else. I'm not sure. It's and for me to do this via Zoom is very difficult. So I don't know. I look forward to being back in person with you guys. Yeah, I'm not sure where we would start. I'd have to go back through it and try to think about it. Maybe we all could do that, or what do you think?
Chris, do you have any idea when you might speak to this, the Maine Lakes attorney? I'll call this person.
No,
Susan
she,
Gallagher. Oh, she's the director, not the attorney.
President.
right,
Yeah.
executive director, but she was gonna try to find, I can follow up with her, in the next week or so to just see where she is with it and keep on it and try to see whether we can get an attorney, via her. But no, I don't know at this point.
Maybe this question has already been answered by other attorneys in other towns and other committees. I'm sure it has.
It's not novel, for sure. And I think it's a heavy lift we're asking on this septics, and we need to do more work on it in terms of. I've said that before, data and.
Yeah.
And legal authority and. And find other, what has been done in other towns.
These are like, while you're speaking, they're like, the 5 septic items we have, as changes.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us? What's our next step?
Our next step might be is to schedule some meetings on these issues going forward and try and gather more people come to talk to us for us to go further in depth with this.
Well, it seems like Dave Roque is getting a little more experience in the possible, shall we say, based on what he's going through right now.
Exactly.
Maybe it would be good to talk to him again.
Yeah, it'd be great to talk to
Yeah.
him.
But, and he's getting a lot of pushback in terms of his ideas.
So it'll be valuable for us to,
To learn from him what's going.
would that be like going, Dave looking at all, these our 5 septic system changes? I know he's looked at them, but
Mhm.
through a new lens of what he's been going through now.
Yeah, I mean,
What's the
he'll
possibility?
probably have a pretty good idea how difficult things will be to have them accepted at this point. Certainly better than when we talked to him before.
Right, I think doing more homework and for us is gonna be better with the planning board, because otherwise we're gonna be
They,
doing
they
it,
already don't like
We're gonna
anything
do
we
it.
say.
if it's not clear.
Yeah.
So do we want to see if he could come to our next meeting? Is that a next step?
That'd be,
Chris, when do you come back?
Yeah, I'm trying to stay out of Maine as much as I can.
Where, pardon me, I wasn't here in the beginning. Where are you?
Florida,
Uh,
Sanibel Island. We're here for the month of January. Then I'm back. I'm back in beginning of February for 2 weeks, and then I'm gone for 2 weeks, and then I'm back for 10 days, and then I'm gone for 10 days or so, and then in April I'm okay until I have my hip replaced at the end of April. So coming and going, just trying to keep entertained.
So you would be around for the February 11th LNR meeting?
Yes, I'm here for February 11th. Yes.
No, I'm not here. I'm not here. What's that date?
Well, that we were thinking of having David Rose come in.
Oh, yeah, I'm colonoscopy that day.
Bummer. But that's in the morning.
Dave Ropes, is he scheduled to come in February 11th
No,
or?
we were just talking about, should we try to get him at our next meeting? Our next meeting is February 11th.
the grandchildren won't be pitching that day.
That's right. the-
Is he doing what?
Diamond is-
His grandson was a pitcher, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I won't be pitching that day.
Oh, right, he used to have that conflict.
does someone want to reach out to Dave and tell him what we want to do? Scope
Okay,
of
so
work.
we're not meeting on the 28th of this month? Well, I'll get it to him.
Oh, that's right.
Chris wouldn't be here, so.
Yeah.
That'd be the 28th, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
28th is a Friday, right? No, wait a minute.
We
That's
still
Tuesday.
used to get twice a month.
28th, yeah.
You're saying the 28th of January?
Yeah,
Well, that's our next meeting.
Right.
well, let's just say that's the next 2 weeks from today. It's what would normally be scheduled as a meeting. We don't necessarily have to meet them if we don't have anything to talk about. I mean, originally, we were just meeting once a month.
Yeah, we did it just to clear up so we could get it
Yeah,
in the time we had.
Yeah, so we could just have the next meeting February 11th. And then maybe we want to everybody look at the document and try to come up with questions that you think we need to address, I guess.
I will not be able to make that meeting. Just be sure to record it on Zoom and I'll watch it.
And if you review the docs and have thoughts, send it to us before the meeting.
I'm review which docs. Are we talking about?
Yeah.
The septic
Septic docs?
changes that we have
Okay, sure.
presented, I think it's 5 of them.
Okay, very good. No problem.
Right now, we have, Charlie's gonna talk to the Auburn, Mr. Blaze. On the first issue, now we have Dave Roke and septics.
Yeah, if you can come.
He can come.
No, for sure.
Who knows Dave wrote to reach out to him? Does
I
anybody?
don't know, but
You do?
Yeah.
Could you reach out and invite him
Sure.
to that meeting?
yeah, for the which one, the 11th?
The 11th.
That's our next meeting.
Unfortunately, my procedure is at 1:15, and I don't think that I will be ready to come to a meeting at 3:30.
No,
Just had that procedure.
Yes, it's relatively,
not fun.
well, the problem, the not fun part is the prep. Procedure itself is,
Procedure, you don't even know.
yeah, procedure is not the problem, it's the prep. It's not.
It seems like we have 3 or 4 subjects we could set up for meetings, whether it's recording of a deed or a whole permitting issue. I mean, we have a number of things to talk about in different meetings if we could schedule.
Well, I think that we could get Charlie Bader's, feedback from John Blaze prior to a meeting. I think we can just shoot that around by email.
Yeah,
I would think that shouldn't wait for a meeting, so we can get some, and if I get back with a municipal attorney via Maine Lakes Association, then I can shoot that around from via email. So we don't really need a meeting for those. I think having Dave Roke in a meeting would be very valuable.
especially to kind of get through the details of these, he's probably gonna maybe help us with if there's any language or the emphasis we need to do.
Are you thinking of Dave at a planning board meeting?
No,
No.
we're thinking of,
Okay,
yeah, we're just
Without-
thinking of having him to come back in and we'll go through the septic items with him. I mean, he's got other opinions on all of this, so we could
Yep.
just have another Dave Roke meeting.
I think John would be willing to come back too, if that makes sense, and John Blaze, that is, but I'll explore a couple things with him.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe he could just, if you share where we are with him, then he might have some other, feedback on other things that we have.
Plus, they've got another 6 months under their belt because they were in the process of implementing this last time we spoke, and when he came in. So I'm sure they've experienced some pushback and potentially legal challenges and things like that. So
Right.
Sound good? Anything else?
Do people want to take a look at the other changes and, and point out to us where they think we need more work? I mean, Paul, you've mentioned we need to go back and do more research. Well, on what? Let's get specific on it, I guess.
All right, question I have we addressed what I think is an important issue is the clear cutting of lots when people want views.
Well,
Now,
what
was
was
that
that?
in shoreline zone?
Is in the shoreline zone, yeah.
And new
if-
construction?
If they're putting in new construction and there was already treated, there's a 100-foot buffer requirement already in the ordinance.
But what's been going on is people buy a house and then they want a view and a lot of, what the arborist says, that's his big business. People, it's happening. Tell us about it,
Well, it goes back to your buffer that you're talking about.
we
You know,
need to
there's
further work on this.
There's this, section 15(0)(2) little b. Where you talk about cutting down. Nothing, under 3 feet is preserved, but there's also talks about keeping a healthy stand of other vegetation. Page 46, the bottom defines other vegetation. Which clearly says you need 4.5 feet tall trees and 4-inch diameter
Right.
trim, different sizes of trees in your stand,
It's like a mix.
which clearly says you can't cut everything to 3 feet. That on top of, topping trees is just not healthy. And cutting everything to 3 feet, you're basically topping all of your little vegetation. It's a bad habit and, it'll be addressed this next season. Because I've kind of just been oblivious to it. I mean, I've seen it.
Yeah.
And chuckled at it, but never thought about it. Now you made me think about it. So-
Those are trees, 4.5 inches.
In diameter at 4.5 feet
4
tall,
feet.
so they gotta be greater than 3 feet tall to meet that
That's right.
measurement. So by this formula, what you're saying isn't allowed. So what I know what the arborist does is they come in and say, well, this one, the pileated woodpecker is tearing apart, and that one's dead on top. Next thing you know, they thinned it out to the point where there's a view, and there might have been legitimate cuts,
Yeah.
but then they don't allow the vegetation to grow back. They cut more than the bottom third.
Keep going up.
And that's covered under the current ordinance, right? That's prohibited under the current ordinance.
It is.
What's going on? Your arborist gets there, as Hans says, and the other thing that I'm concerned about, and I've got an arborist going there tomorrow, I hope he's talked to him. My house, that, these big pine trees are gonna fall over my house and demolish it. Because it's happening all over the place.
Yeah. These end of life pines, especially where Paul lives, out of, Forest Point. They got these big limbs that die on the top. Heavy winds, they crack and fall. And they do damage when they land. I mean, some of them you see sticking out of the ground like spears. So, it's a legitimate concern for safety of habited areas that these trees get limbed. And one of Paul's neighbors had some trees limbed and you got a wonderful view. But I mean, they limbed clear up to the top because that's where the dead limbs were. So they did more than the bottom third, but it was required.
Right.
So if it's already part of the existing ordinance, is it something that we need to strengthen? Because our kind of mission here is to strengthen the shoreline zone. Is it there and we just need to make sure that people are adhering to it, or do we need to strengthen the ordinance itself?
Well, if you read this section. Little b, it's convoluted. I mean, you read it 5 times and think you understand it by the time you're done, and it's still complicated.
Right.
And, Lynn Geiger brought it up in her presentation that she said, throw it out because it's just beyond comprehension.
But it's chapter 1000 required, correct?
And yeah, it's from the state.
Yeah.
Oh, so that wording is from the state?
Yep.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
But if we're getting evidence that people think it's convoluted and it's not working, then anything we do is gonna be more stringent. Right?
So what do you mean by that?
Well, this formula, Hans is saying is convoluted.
Yeah.
Lynn Geiger's, the
You can't, it's
Lynn Geiger says it doesn't work.
yeah.
So anything we do that works is gonna be more stringent.
Oh, if it works, it's more stringent. Yeah, because, right, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And we should be able to do it.
Well, but if you, she said throw it out. And
Well, we can't. No.
you can't,
You don't have
you
to
can't-
throw it out, but you can say on top of it, you can have some operating language that will enable. Make it more stringent, you can't clear cut, you can't. Cut for purposes of views, and that allows more. Discretion.
Yeah, but it's like you say you're gonna cut the trees because they're gonna fall on your house. Well, I have the same situation on my road where I live, and they cut all these trees on the lake. And, cause, they thought they were gonna fall on their house, and then 50 trees fell last December on my land because the buffer was gone. So is that gonna be all around the lake? As far as cause it's all a grove, and when the front trees are cut, the back trees fall down.
I'm suggesting that we need to have, this is a topic for discussion, I don't think we can resolve it tonight. That is just an idea that's bothered me.
Yeah, but it's a problem.
I
And you
think
got
it's,
these old,
Everything has ramifications.
we get pine trees that are, that are 6 foot diameter, and they come down on it. My neighbor had a limb from not the bottom of the tree, but it was where the Y came down on his house. And it was totally demolished.
I had a pine tree limb fall and take out part of my garage. So, no, and we have 120-foot pine trees, white pines all around us. So
Yeah,
I guess if somebody has an idea as to what kind of language we would put into the ordinance, then put it forward. But we've wrestled with this. We've all looked at it. We all say, wow, it's confusing. I don't know. But we have to have something that is as equally stringent or more stringent, or the DEP will bounce it back. That's my understanding. So,
I'm just proposing this as a subject matter.
Yeah, down
That's all. I can resolve it today.
okay.
I built that place underneath a big pine tree.
So one other thing we can talk about is that in Paul's email about the 1 gallon containers. I mean, you had a couple questions about this, that shoreland buffer is not defined, and I had written this based on what Hans had related to us, and shoreline buffer is in the ordinance. I don't know if it's clear or not, but I think that that's sort of a planning board or municipal attorney question as to whether that's defined already in the ordinance because it's in there, or whether it needs to be defined. The question about, I think it's, Hans was saying that people are planting 5 gallon buckets, and that's damaging. And we decided that 1 gallon was adequate, and so that's what we're doing. Is that not clear, I guess?
I think you need to further define it. Well, first of all, I don't know what shoreline buffer means. We'll pass by that. Then you're gonna have, the CEO has to come out every time more than 1 gallon container is planted, and what if as I said, what's the time limit on this? Is what if a guy decides he's gonna do it every other day, so one day. We've got to make it.
So
We have to think this through.
Paul, it is containers larger than 1 gallon. It's not multiples of, it's a 2 gallon container, it's a 5 gallon container,
I
Those,
must re-
those need permission,
misread
but
that.
somebody can plant one gallon a day for a year, or they can do 10 at once or 15. But the concept was to keep people from excavating the shoreline with large buckets. So I'd ask Hans, you've seen this. Do you think that this is adequate, what I wrote?
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me right now.
Okay.
Which one is this?
It's the new change number 12.
It's change
Okay.
number 12.
Okay.
It's in 15.
Well, it's change number 12 in the new document.
Okay.
And we're
Okay,
adding,
so within the shoreline buffer, is that your proposed 30-foot buffer?
Mhm.
No,
Or the
it's,
75?
my intent was to pick up the 100 foot no cut zone, which I think is referred to as a shoreline buffer in the ordinance. That could be wrong, but no, it has nothing to do with the recovery buffer, the 30 foot or anything like that. It's the 100 foot setback where you can't build a building, you can't, you have restrictions on what you can cut. And that, I believe in the ordinance, is referred to as a shoreline buffer. But, that, I could be wrong with that. That was my interpretation.
I think this would be more effective within a 25 or 30-foot setback from the lake. You know, just to apply this to 100 feet. Not every lot is the same,
Right,
and I don't think it has merit. I think it would be laughed out if you didn't focus it on a critical part of the your buffer area.
So 30 feet or 30%.
Yeah,
well, just, or within 30 feet of the lake. I mean, 30
Yeah.
feet of the shoreline. So, yeah, so instead of within the shoreline buffer, we could say within 30 feet. And yeah, okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
So somebody could plant 100 1 gallon containers and that's okay.
yes,
It's kind of funny business, isn't it? To do that.
work.
But you can't plant 1 5 gallon container, which would probably be less erosion.
You have to have permission to do it.
and it's all dependent on, if not every lot around this lake is the same.
That's for sure.
And I mean, Bacon's Cove is all saying. Well, a 5 gallon container right on 5 feet from the water is really not gonna make a lot of difference.
Right,
But when you get out to where you've got inclines and rocks and the icebergs, you dig a 5 foot hole or a 5 gallon hole. It's gonna do some damage. It's
right.
gonna weaken the embankment. If you can dig, cause it's full of rocks, so to make that size for that container. You're excavating, you're moving some,
It's a lot of work.
you're moving the fabric of the
Right bars.
basement.
So does that seem, Hans, that seems like it, obviously it's not perfect. People can still abuse things with this, but is this kind of what you had in mind?
Yeah, it's a good jumping off place.
Okay, good. That's all I think I have right now.
So are we gonna all review the septic recommendations and meet here in 2 weeks, or are we gonna meet here on the 11th of February, hopefully with Dave Rowe? I just kind of
I
lost.
think it's February 11th.
Okay.
What was that, Pat?
Our next meeting is February 11th.
I think so. I think that, you know, we can, I'd love people to look at this and think about things and come up with ideas on each of these changes. And then we can try to line up Dave Roque, and then I can try to line up some legal advice on this, and you know, and then sort of slow it down, go back to to Sarah Langette and say, you know, we'd like to hold off and give you guys a rest and give us time to better prepare. And then if we could, and we might not get back to this until, you know, May or June, but if we could come at that point with, you know, maybe we don't have 13 changes. Maybe by that time we've only got 7 or 6 or something. But if we've have vetted them, if we have a legal opinion that backs them up, if we've got more, you know, more research if needed. I don't know. That seems like it makes sense to me. What does everybody think?
Makes sense. Very interesting.
Question, has anybody reached out to the short-term rental committee?
I don't know if it's actually up and functioning yet, because
I hadn't heard anything about it.
what are we reaching out regarding it?
Well, change number 4
Septic?
would fit into that.
Okay, I can reach out, just find out the status of that committee and see.
Yeah. And that would,
I'll do that.
if we would include all rental properties. That's kind of a easy way to knock that one down.
Just a note on short-term rentals. I think particularly within the shoreland zone. There's the town of Fayette, I believe, just passed an ordinance in that regard. That I think just went into effect as of January 25. So somebody might want to research that.
Okay.
You all want some good news?
Yes.
We are almost out of the comment period for the state's DEP chapter 310 rules changes. Okay. I did comment in support of the changes. What they're doing is it's chapter 310 covers the Natural Resources Protection Act. So when somebody applies for a permit by rule, the new rule change will require them to notify abutters when they apply, not when it's accepted.
Even better.
So everybody will know up front, and that includes the municipality. So,
Great.
so that's half of one of your battles right there.
Yeah, well, that's great.
And even stricter than we were hoping for.
Now, who has to do the notification?
The
Notifying
The applicant.
has to do the notifying.
So when they send in their application to DEP, they have to have already notified the abutters and the municipality.
Right.
So everybody knows in advance.
Yeah.
But what's the timing on this getting passed
It's in the comment period now, so I would think the next session it would be passed.
of the legislature?
And can abutters weigh in on the application before it's granted?
I would think that's why they.
That's why they
want the
do
whole
it,
page.
yeah.
I mean, in the old days, I remember that if somebody wanted a variance, that the abutters had to be notified, because I remember being notified twice on my.
That's right. Yeah, that's zoning,
Yeah,
Board of Appeals.
so you can't do what you want all the time.
Anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion,
Thank you, Chris.
meeting adjourned. Thank you, Chris, for coming in.
Thanks, everybody.
Step.
So the next meeting is the 11th?
next meeting
February
is
11th.
February 11th.
Which, by the way, is Thomas Edison's birthday and not coincidentally, National Inventors Day.
Oh, good.
Did Edison get a colonoscopy?
Sure.
Aren't you getting a little old?
He invented it.
Aren't you getting a little old colonoscopies? They say after a certain age, you shouldn't have them.
Do what your doctor tells you to do.
Yeah. What are they?
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Have you been down on that road by me?
Almost went down today. I saw the dirt tracks coming out. I've been watching, waiting for them to get started.
Oh, they've started.
Started,
Yeah, they're putting a foundation under that place that's right on the lake.
well, they're moving it back.
Oh, they are moving it back?
Yeah.
Doesn't look like it to me.
Well,
It was a mud hole. So if they had seen you. They said, no, they haven't. Do they have a permit?
yeah, that's how I know it's gonna happen.
Okay.
They went to the planning board. They went to the planning board and that's how they went.
Do that.
Sorry.
I wonder why they want to do that.
Do what?
Put a foundation on this
No.
camp, this little
So you can live in
skinny.
it year round.
Good luck.
Good night, folks.
Good night.
Right.
Oh, you should see the mess.
Really?
Oh. I pointed out to them, the trees will, the roots will be killed and. Oh.
Too bad that 25-foot rule